everyone, how are you all? I hope you all are doing good. So, have you watched the last session of this chapter? Because we are just continuing with the same chapter, discussing some more topics about it, that is the carbon and its compound. So, students, in this session, that we are going to study about these topics, that is the versatile nature of carbon, tetravalency, catenation, compounds of carbon, CO and CO2. So, we'll see these topics in today's session. Okay. So, starting with the very first topic. That means we are not going to waste time. We are just focusing over the topics. Okay. So, the very first topic is versatile nature of carbon. Versatile nature. Why we are calling it as the versatile nature? Because, student, if you have noticed this thing in your junior classes, like when you were studying about the coal and petroleum. So, if you notice that thing, that oh, I'm so sorry. Actually, it happened. Now it's fine. That the coil and petroleum, how they are getting formed, students. So we know this thing, that coal and petroleum are going to be formed from the dead and decaying part, or we can say that the fossils of organism, है ना, living organisms like plants and animals. So, but we know one more thing, that the coils and petrol are having the carbon content, that they contain carbon content. Exactly. That means if they are containing carbon, so definitely fossils like the organism is also getting carbon, because the transferring of the molecules are there, na? Because from the fossils of the living organisms, coil and petroleum is getting formed. So eventually there will be carbon in the living organism as well. So that's how, student, we can say that the carbon is present everywhere, that it can form bond with any of the atoms. So that's how the carbon is having a versatile nature. Carbon is a versatile element and is found in many different chemical compounds, including those found in space. Carbon is versatile because it can form single, double, triple bond, as we have studied about single, double, triple bond. So carbon is having that versatility, that it can form all the types of the bonds. Okay. It can also form chains, branch chains, rings when connected to the other carbon atom. So we are going to see that part also. Like if you notice the body of human beings, so we are also made up of carbon compounds only, student. It's just that they are the long chain of the carbon compounds, or you can say complex compounds are there, that we can't study them. Okay. Eventually, like we can say that researcher studies them very well, and but right now if we talk about ourselves, so we can't study them. But there are the long chain of the carbon atom, they are the complex form, and they are present in the branching ring form. So we are having different type of structure for the carbon atoms. That means carbon is one of those versatile atom, or we can say that element, which can undergo any type, like any type of bond formation, single, double, triple, or you can find it out in the form of chain, branching chain, ring. So that's how, student, carbon is very versatile in nature. Okay. So, and you can also say one more thing, student, that carbon is the base of what, of life. Why we are calling it as a base of life? Because everything contains carbon atom, carbon element. It just depend upon the percentage of carbon. Like some few things are having more content of carbon, some of them are having less content of carbon. So we are not discussing about it, but the base of everything is carbon. Even the human body, animal body, plant body, so all of these things contain carbon compounds only. Okay. So that's how we are calling it as the versatile element, or the versatile nature of carbon. Okay. Now for that, students, I'm just going to show you one video here, so I hope you will be liking that video. Okay. So let's watch it.
Versatile nature of carbon. Already we saw how many things we use contain carbon.
See, students, like we already know that how many things we are using that which contains carbon atom. Exactly.
In fact, we ourselves are made up of carbon compounds.
Even though, students, if you notice this video, that in this video you can observe these points, that even though our human body is made up of carbon atoms only, है ना? Like the number of carbon compound formula recently estimated to be about 3 million carbon compounds are there. So you can see that everything is containing carbon only, है ना? मतलब it's not like that other elements are not there. Yes, they are also there, but most of the compounds you will be seeing that they are having carbon in them. ठीक है?
Numbers of carbon compounds formulae are recently estimated to be about 3 million.
3 million.
The nature of the covalent bond enables carbon to form a large number of compounds.
See students, because of the covalent nature of the carbon, like as we have studied about the ionic bond and covalent bond. So in that what we have studied about, that the ionic bonds are those type of bonds which are formed because of the pairing of ions. When ions got combined together by the transferring of electron, so it's like that there is the ionic bond. But if we talk about covalent bond, so in the covalent bond we don't find out any ions. It's like that there's a sharing of electrons. And in that part, student, if you have noticed, so the carbon and compounds, or we can say that the carbon group is one of those group which is having the ability to form covalent bond. That means sharing of electrons. So that's how student carbon can form a large number of compounds because of its covalent character. Okay.
Two factors noticed in the case of carbon.
Two factors we are noticing.
Carbon has the unique ability to form bonds with other atoms of carbon, giving rise to large molecules. This property is called catenation.
So students, two properties are there. The very first thing, because of its covalent character, because of the sharing of electrons, because of its ability to bond with the other atom of the carbon, so they are giving a large molecule, and the connection of the carbon with the other carbon, and that's how forming a large molecule. This property we call it as catenation property. Even though student, if you notice that the elements which present in the 14th group, because we know this thing that 14th group contains carbon, carbon and silicon. So carbon is only one of those which can form a large, or you can say long chain of the carbon atoms by combining with each other, by sharing of electrons. So that property is called as the catenation property. Okay, it's like that student, silicon can also undergo catenation, but it's not very much high for silicon. Okay, so that's the special quality about carbon, that they can combine with themselves, like with the another carbon atom, because of the sharing of electrons between them. And this is then this unique property is called as the catenation property. And that's how, student, if you can see that carbon is an element. Okay, now you can imagine that how small it is. Okay, and it's like that when they are combining with the carbon, that's how they are forming large molecule, and that's how our body is getting developed, because that's the whole point. So you can see that you can imagine that how much the power of catenation carbon is having, that they can combine with so many number of carbon atoms, so that they are combining together, forming large molecules and becoming versatile in nature. So the very first property is the catenation.
These compounds may have long chains of carbon, branched chains of carbon, or arranged in rings.
So you can see that if you see that they are present in the long chain, branching, ring type of form, every type is there.
Atoms may be linked by single, double, or triple bond. The carbon-carbon bond is very strong and hence stable. This gives a large number of compounds with many carbon atoms linked to each other.
See students, carbon-carbon bond is very stable. See, sometimes you can say they are not stable because that is the covalent compound. But if we see when they are forming a long carbon chain, or they are forming cyclic structure, or they are forming a giant molecule, so at that point they become very stable in nature. Okay students, because you can see that the sharing is going to be very high. And according to that there is a very large molecule is getting formed, and if such condition is appearing, so that's how it becomes stable in nature. If we talk about the allotropes of carbon, which we are going to study eventually, that the diamond is one of those. Okay, so in that what we'll be looking, that diamond is stable in nature because the giant structure of diamond which we are getting because of the network of carbon, so it become stable in nature. Okay,
carbon compounds are linked by single bonds between the carbon atoms are called saturated compounds.
See student, all these saturated compounds and unsaturated compound we'll study, but right now what is the main point is that the carbon is very versatile in nature because of its property of catenation. Okay, now what's the tetravalency? That is the another factor, you can say that it is very versatile in nature. Tetravalency, if you remember student, that we have studied about univalent, univalent and divalent. If I ask you, for example, if we talk about sodium, so sodium is having the atomic number of 11. not 10. That's the mess here. Don't worry. It is 11. Okay. So it's like 11. And if I do the electronic configuration, so it would be KLM. That is the 281. Exactly. But now, if we see when the sodium wants to attain its configuration similarly to the noble gases, so we can see that it is going to donate us one of the electron, and when it is donating its one of the electrons, so it will convert into the sodium ion, and that's how we call it as the univalent ion, because the valency of the sodium is 1. But now when we talk about tetravalent, because univalent is 1, divalent is 2, trivalent is 3, and the tetravalency now it will become 4. That means when an atom or an element is having 4 electrons in its outermost shell, that will show its tetravalency. But it's like that, student, if we talk about carbon, है ना? So in carbon, the atomic number is 6. It would be K and L, that is 2, 4. Now, students, what you will be noticing that the outer shell contains 4 electrons. That's why it is tetravalent in nature. But it says that there will be two conditions. Either it can lose electrons or it can gain electrons. So the losing of 4 electrons and the gaining of 4 electrons is a very difficult thing. Okay, so that's how, student, carbon will not lose the electrons or neither gain the electron. Why, students? Because it will undergo the sharing, and when it will undergo the sharing, that's how it will form 4 covalent bonds, so that it can attain the stable electronic configuration of noble gases only. That is why we call it as the tetravalency of carbon. For example, students, like if we take one example here, so it is the carbon which is having 4 electrons in its outer shell. Okay, now if I give one hydrogen to it, one hydrogen, one hydrogen, because we know this thing that hydrogen is having the atomic number of 1, that is K shell will having 1 electron. So you will be looking at that the carbon is sharing these electrons, and that's how, if you notice that a carbon atom is having the 8 electrons in total, that means it is acquiring the noble gas configuration only. And then if you notice this, there the hydrogen is also sharing electrons with the carbon, and that's how it will become covalent compound because of the sharing of electrons. So that's how, student, the carbon shows the valency, that is the tetravalency. So we can see it means it has 4 electrons in the outermost shell. Carbon obeys the octet rule and forms 4 covalent bonds with other atoms to get a stable electronic configuration, and can form 4 with only other atoms, but other carbon atoms as well. It's not like that only other atoms are involved. A carbon atom can also be there. For example, it is the one thing, but if it is the condition like this, carbon, carbon, so one electron is there, then 3 hydrogen is required. One hydrogen you can see. So that's how it can combine with the carbon atom as well and with the another atom as well. So that's how you can see that this carbon is having all the 8 electrons in its outer shell, and similarly this carbon will also having 8 electron in its outer shell. So that's how, student, because of the tetravalency, because of the 4 electrons in its outer shell, carbon can combine with the other 4 atoms, or it like that the atom can be carbon and can be other element as well. Okay, so this is called as the tetravalency of carbon. And see, student, when it is tetravalent in nature, when it is having that property that it can combine with other carbon atoms because of the sharing of electrons, so it will leading to what property? Exactly, catenation property. Because catenation is what? When the carbon atoms are combining together and forming a large molecule, that we called as catenation. And that property is coming from where? From the tetravalency of carbon. Okay, so that's how, student, carbon become very versatile in nature. So here is the catenation. So catenation occurs most readily with carbon because they have the ability to form covalent bond. For example, students, like right now I have just tell you about the CH4, C2H6. But if I talk about C4H10, you will be coming to know that how the hydrogen is 10 at that point. Because, student, what you have to notice for this chapter, that carbon requires 4 covalent bond, and to satisfy carbon, generally, like we are going to study about hydrocarbons. That means the compounds which contains hydrogen and carbon both. So that will require hydrogen only to satisfy its you can say that the valency. So depending upon that, student, we need hydrogen atoms. If you look at the C4H10, so it's like that four carbon atoms are attached together. Now that means, student, this carbon is having the one bond. So for the satisfaction, it will require three hydrogen here. It will require two hydrogen, and here it will require again three hydrogen. So on the dependence that the carbon is forming how many bonds and how many hydrogen it will require to satisfy its electronic configuration, similarly to the noble gases, that much of hydrogen we are adding into it. And you can see that the carbon are combining together and forming a large molecule. It is a very small molecule which I have shown you. There could be possibility of number of carbon atoms. Okay, and this property is called as the catenation property. Fine. So you can see here examples of catenation property. Like it could be in the open chain. You can see that carbon attaching, carbon attaching. It could be in the form of the cyclic ring as well. So a closed chain form. So it is like that. So it's not like that only straight chain is going to be combining in the form of long chain. It could be the possibility ring structure can also be there, or it's like that three-dimensional structure can also be, like if you notice that carbon attaching. So it's like that attaching will be there, like combination is going on. So that's how the possibilities are there, that how many carbon atoms are going to be combined together. Okay, so that we called as the catenation property. Now, coming to the last topic of today's session, as we have discussed about the versatile nature of carbon, catenation, tetravalency. Now, coming to the compounds of carbon, that is the CO and CO2. So, students, if you notice one thing, that CO is what we call it as, carbon monoxide. So, these are the oxides of carbon. And if you see, that is the CO2, so we call it as carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide, because it is containing two oxygen atoms, so both are the oxides of carbon only. Okay, so it's just that, student, how it is getting formed, like because we know that carbon combines with hydrogen because of its tetravalency. So how it is getting formed here? So in this case, students, and first of all, the very first thing, that how it is getting formed. So generally, student, carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide are formed whenever non-metals react with oxygen. Okay, when the non-metal reacts with oxygen, so it forms, we can say it form acidic or the neutral oxide. Fine, from the metals and non-metals chapter, if you remember. So that's how, student, when there's the carbon and when there's a proper supply of oxygen, so that it will be forming carbon dioxide. But when there is the insufficient supply of oxygen, okay, insufficient, we can say, when proper supply is not there, so that's how, student, at that condition we will be getting carbon monoxide. Carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide, accordingly it will be acidic in nature, and this is neutral in nature. Fine. So these are the carbon compounds, student. Even though, like if there is any wood, because wood contains what? Wood again contains carbon atom, and it's like that when carbon is, just a second, student. Yeah, coming back to the class. So it's like that when it is neutral and acidic in nature. Okay, so what I was telling you, I forgot. Wood. Like if there is wood and we are burning it in the presence of oxygen, so this wood contains carbon only. Okay, and when there is a proper supply of oxygen, so it will forming carbon dioxide. But if there is insufficient, not sufficient supply of oxygen, so it will form carbon monoxide. So these two are the oxides of carbon, and eventually we can also call them as the compounds of carbon. Okay, CO and CO2. And now you will say, ma'am, how they are forming bonds? Okay, because we know this thing, that the carbon will be having four electrons. So for this CO2, students, if you notice, carbon is having four electrons in its outer shell. And if you know that for oxygen, the atomic number is 8, that we can write down it is in the form of Kl, that is the 2,6. That means it would requiring two electrons in its outer shell to attain the electronic configuration of noble gases. है ना? So one oxygen this side, two electrons. We can say that six electrons in their outer shell. Exactly, that is the whole condition. If you notice, carbon will be sharing the electrons with the oxygen, so it will be having 8 electrons. If you notice, this oxygen will share the electrons with the carbon, and again this will, so that's how the all these three atoms will be having 8 electrons in their outer shell. But because student, if you notice that there is the two, because what happened, if carbon and carbon is there, so they will be sharing one electrons, and because of that single bond is there. And when two pairs of electrons are getting shared, so that's how it will become double bond. So that is the structure of CO2. Okay. And if we talk about carbon monoxide, that means it will be having only one oxygen. So how it is going on? So in that case, student, what will be the condition? As we know, the electronegativity factor. Okay, that means the atom which is having the ability to gain electrons easily. So if we compare carbon and oxygen, so will be who is having more capacity to gain electron? So we know that the oxygen is one of those. So that's how student, carbon double bond O, and it will be having some positive and negative. And if this negative charge is transferred here, so it will be having this type of bond. Okay. And that's how students, there will be, you can say that the structure of carbon monoxide is getting formed. Fine, students. So this is how the carbon compound is getting formed, that is the carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide, and that's how you will be getting the structure for them. Okay. So I hope you got the clarity about the concepts which we have to discuss in today's class. So here are the questions now. Is everything made out of carbon? Hmm. All on earth consist of combination of various elements, all of which can be found in the periodic table. It's just that, student, that everything, like every element is there, but every component will be having carbon only. So existence without coal would be unlikely for an earth. Coil is the main component of your body's calorie, carbohydrate, fats, genes, and muscle tissues, and all these contain what? Carbon. They are all carbon compounds. That yes, other elements will also be there, but carbon will all, like carbon is the base of it. So that's a student, carbon is everywhere. Okay. What are the four types of the carbon compounds? Four major compounds are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. And you know this thing, students, that these all are the compounds, or these all are the four compounds which are present in our body. And all these compounds we require in our diet as well, so that we can have balanced diet. Not exactly nucleic acid, hai na? But these are present in our body as well. So that's how carbon is everywhere. So, with that, student, we have completed our today's session. And in today's session, we have seen the versatile nature of carbon. Why it is? Because it is having the tetravalency, and because of that tetravalency, it can combine with the more and more number of carbon atoms, which result into the property of catenation. And that's how we are getting large molecules of the carbon. And then we have discussed about the carbon compound, that is the carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide. Okay. So with that, student, we are just going to end up today's session. Now what you have to do is you can watch the session carefully, है ना? It's your duty now. And then if you have any doubt, you can post your doubt on the public or private forum of askIITians, and you will be getting reply or the answer from the expert side. So that's all, students. Thank you very much for watching today's session. Thank you.